Hello and welcome to our channel. Today I am doing a quick little debunking of a common meme that floats around on social media at this time of year at the request of a student. So you could consider this as falling into our historical content that we tend to post around the history of witchcraft and the history of paganism, but this one will be a lot shorter than some of our longer content, as there really isn't that much information to cover. So let's get into it. A popular image goes around every year, right around this time of year, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, that shows a statue of Ishtar. There's a caption that reads, "This is Ishtar," pronounced Easter. Easter was originally the celebration of Ishtar, the Assyrian and Babylonian goddess of fertility and sex. Her symbols, like the egg and the bunny, were and still are fertility and sex symbols. Or did you actually think eggs and bunnies had anything to do with the resurrection? After Constantine decided to Christianize the empire, Easter was changed to represent Jesus. But at its roots, Easter, which is how you pronounce Ishtar, is all about celebrating fertility and sex. This claim is inaccurate, primarily because of the lack of any historical evidence for any of it. While Christianity did indeed co-opt the rituals of conquered peoples, and it worked fairly well for them as a strategy, this meme isn't an accurate example of that practice. Ishtar was the goddess of war, sex, and sacred sex works, not fertility. Ishtar's symbols were the lion, the morning star, and 8 or 16 pointed stars, not the egg or the bunny. The word Easter does not derive from Ishtar either. In fact, English and German are in the minority of languages that use a form of the word Easter. Elsewhere, the observance is generally under the name of Pascha, which is Latin, which is derived from the Hebrew, which I'm going to do my best not to completely horribly mispronounce. I did watch several videos. Pasach, meaning of or associated with Passover. Without any in-depth records or documents, historians actually know very little about the goddess that so many people then claim Easter was actually a celebration of, Eostre. The Old English deity, Eostre, is attested to exist in precisely one historical document, one record, solely by an English Catholic monk, Saint Bede Venerabilis, who lived from circa 672-73 CE to 735 CE, in his 8th century work, The Reckoning of Time. Eostre Monath has a name which is now translated Paschal month, and which was once called after a goddess of theirs, named Eostre, in whose honor feasts were celebrated in that month. Now they designate that Paschal season by her name, calling the joys of the new rite by the time-honored name of the old observance. This is in 725 CE. It is noteworthy that so far, this is literally the only known piece of writing in human history that mentions the goddess Eostre. It is also very likely that Saint Bede was mistaken about this adoption, as Eostre does not appear in any of the surrounding mythologies of the local area. Saint Bede was not a Germanic pagan, he was a Christian monk. Additionally, he was not speaking from lived experience or actual knowledge that he witnessed. By the time that he was writing, the area was primarily Christianized. He also did not state in this single record that Eostre was a spring goddess or a fertility goddess, only that she was honored during the month of April. Additionally, there is no historic Germanic holiday that is an equivalent to Easter. Several hundred years later, Jacob Grimm claimed to have found evidence of Eostre in Anglo-Saxon folklore, but, as was pretty common for Grimm, he failed to provide any written historical evidence for his claim. The Anglos and Saxons actually had a different goddess they worshipped during March, whose name I'm not going to pronounce, but I'm going to put it on the screen. I'm not even going to try. So if Eostre did exist, she was likely a local tribal goddess of the Anglo and Saxon groups of ancient Britannia in South England, not Germany. Jacob Grimm, in his 1835 CE book, Deutsche Mythology, claimed that Eoster must have been a local version of a more widespread Germanic goddess, whom he named Ostara. He claimed that an old High German festival of Ostarun was celebrated during Ostara Menod, April, in Old High German, and that the month was dedicated to the West Germanic goddess Ostara, a goddess of the sunrise and dawn. He then forcibly tried to merge this goddess that he just made up, Ostara, with Eoster. If Eoster even existed, she would be from today's southern England. If Ostara even existed, she would be from modern Germany. Osterun was a small festival in local West Germany, but it was not celebrated outside of that region. The Norse and other Germanic tribes never celebrated Osterun or worshipped a goddess named Ostara. It has also been suggested that Ostara may have her origins in the Austria Hine. Shrines in Germany have been found that contain over 150 Romano-Germanic votive inscriptions to a deity, the Matrone Austria Hine. They were found near Morkenharf and date to around 150 to 250 CE. Some historians link the Matrone Austria Hine etymologically with Eoster, as they are both related to the East, while others argue against this interpretation. A new book by Dr. Philip A. Shaw of the University of Leicester, Eoster, Freda, and the Cult of Matrons, which I have not yet read, is said to link the Romano-Germanic votive inscriptions to the matron Austria Hine to Eoster, and claims that Eoster really existed, but that she was entirely local to Kent, and that the German month names Ostermonat and Redmonat were carried to Germany and France by Anglo-Saxon missionaries. So there's a person who is claiming that Eoster actually existed, but certainly not that she was associated with Ishtar, and not making these broad claims that this was actually a sacred fertility ritual with bunnies and eggs that the Christians co-opted. Another claim that I've seen going around is that Ostara, the ancient Germanic goddess of the spring, transformed a bird into a hare, and the hare responded by laying colored eggs for her festival. Some online sources, such as Goddess Gift, claim this story is incredibly ancient. Some protest that claim and instead claim that it is an entirely modern myth. The blog Family Christmas Online referred to the story as a modern-day hoax popularized by New Age circles, and that no such myth was ever associated with Eoster or any goddess before 1987. The aforementioned Family Christmas Online claimed the origin of the myth was, quote, "As far as I can tell, the Eoster bird bunny story dates back to an article published in a K-12 school resource by feel-good writer and frequent Oprah guest Sarah Ban Brethnak. In 1990, she incorporated the article's content in Mrs. Sharp's traditions, reviving Victorian family celebrations of comfort and joy. Then, in 2002, Jean-Andrew Dickman published a version of Brethnak's story as The Coming of Eoster in Cricket Magazine's A Weekly Reader's sort of publication. Neither of these perspectives is correct. The claim that Ostara was related to a hare in some way is neither from the ancient world nor from the extremely modern one. For example, in June 8th, 1889, an issue of the journal American Notes and Queries, page 64, The Hare and Easter, Whence Comes the Legend of the Hare in Connection with Easter? In Germany and among the Pennsylvania Germans, toy rabbits or hares made of canton flannel stuffed with cotton are given as gifts on Easter morning. The children are told that this Oster has laid the Easter eggs. This curious idea is thus explained. The hare was originally a bird and was changed into a quadruped by the goddess Ostara. In gratitude to Ostara or Easter, the hare exercises its original bird function to lay eggs for the goddess on her festal day. Prior to that, the English journal Folklore in 1883 CE featured a note by H. Krebs, which cited a source. Easter eggs and the hare. Some time ago, the question was raised how it came that, according to South German still prevailing folklore, the hare is believed by children to lay the Easter eggs. I venture now to offer a probable answer to it. Originally, the hare seems to have been a bird, which the ancient Teutonic goddess Ostara, the Anglo-Saxon Iestr or Eostr, as Bede calls her, transformed into a quadruped. For this reason, the hare, in grateful recollection of its former quality as bird and swift messenger of the spring goddess, is able to lay eggs on her festival at Easter time. It cites as its source a German book by K.A. Oberl that, again, I'm not going to try and pronounce. I'll just put the name up there for you all, which was translated word for word by Kreb. As his source, Oberl listed the 1874 CE book by the German professor and philologist Adolf Holtzmann, who lived from 1810 to 1870. His book, Deutsche Mythology, which speculated on the origin of the Easter hare and associated it with the goddess Ostara. The Easter hare is inexplicable to me, but probably the hare was the sacred animal of Ostara, just as there is a hare on the statue of the Celtic goddess Abnoba. Holtzmann also stated, by the way, the hare must once have been a bird because it lays eggs. This simple statement seems to be Oberl's source for the idea that the goddess Ostara changed the bird into a hare. But the sentence is actually quite ambiguous. In both English and German, it could mean that the bird was transformed into a hare, or it could mean that the role of the hare in the story used to be occupied by a bird. There is only one older source that Holtzmann claimed associated Ostara with a hare, which was written in southwest Germany in 1682 by the professor of medicine George Frank von Freckenau, who lived from 1643 to 1704. De ovis paucialibus. But I have not been able to find an older source than that, nor have I been able to find a translation of that text as yet. Only academic references that claim that it contains the oldest reference to Ostara being associated with a hare. Shortly after the academic publication of this idea that Ostara turned a bird into a hare and that hare then lays eggs, it became part of popular culture. Rather than this being something that was popular culture, that then academics wrote down, and we went from there, this actually seems to have gone the other way around, right? The November 1896 CE issue of Popular Science Monthly featured an article by Walter James Hoffman called Popular Superstitions, which claimed Ostara was an ancient Teutonic goddess. The association of the hare with eggs is curious, and the explanation is found in the belief that originally the hare seems to have been a bird, which the ancient Teutonic goddess Ostara turned into a quadruped. For this reason, the hare, in grateful recognition of its former quality as a bird and swift messenger of the spring goddess, is able to lay eggs on her festival at Easter time. You're noticing some identical language there? Because I certainly am. Popular records often cite Ostara's association with birds and bunnies as being really ancient, such as in Crawford Avalanche, published on April 12, 1900 CE, which claims the story is one of the oldest in mythology. Origin of Easter rabbits. According to Teutonic tradition, bunny was once a bird. One of the quaint and interesting features of our modern Easter carnival is the appearance in shop windows side by side with the emblematic colored egg of a pert, tall-eared rabbit. And those who cannot understand why bunny should have a place in our Easter decorations shrug their shoulders and think it a trick to please the children. But the legend of the Easter rabbit is one of the oldest in mythology and is mentioned in the early folklore of southern Germany. Originally, it appears the rabbit was a bird, which the ancient Teutonic goddess Ostara, goddess of the east or of spring, transformed into a quadruped. For this reason, the rabbit or hare is grateful, and in remembrance of its former condition as a bird and as a swift messenger of spring, and of the goddess whom it served, is able to lay colored Easter eggs on her festival in the springtime. The colors illustrating the theory that when it was a bird, the rabbit laid colored eggs, and an egg has always been a symbol of the resurrection and therefore used as an illustration of Easter. The Richmond Times from March 30th, 1902 CE made a reference to the mythology being influenced by the barbarous nature of the heathen Saxons. Easter, a relic of pagan days. Strange as it may seem, Eastertide, like Christmas, is a relic of pagan days. In former days, when the dawn of civilization was just beginning to break, that time of the year when winter was passing away and summer approaching was made a period of festivity. The people, in their blind fashion, thanked the unseen beings who ruled the world for the breaking up of the frost time, and prayed for plenteous harvests and fruitful flocks and herds. When Christianity pushed its way further and further into then barbaric world, the early missionaries, not wishing to antagonize their prospective converts, took this festival and consecrated its observance to the new form of faith. In England, the festival became known as Easter from the goddess Eoster, and in the egg so widely looked upon as typical of Easter is a mark of the old legend of a bird that was changed into a hare in the spring. Over time, the myth grew and new claims were added, such as that the hare actually pulled Ostara's chariot, as seen in the Warren, Minnesota sheaf of April 13, 1911 CE. The Easter bunny is said to have been the bird which at one time drew the chariot of the goddess of spring, and it turned into a hare. Every year, however, at the coming of spring, the hare remembers, and in commemoration of its original bird nature, lays eggs as an offering to spring and youth it symbolizes. So although the claims that a goddess Ostara was the origin of Easter and that she was associated with Easter bunnies because she turned a bird into Easter bunnies isn't ancient, it isn't new either. It's not that we all of a sudden just came up with this. This has been going around for a while, and it was something that would have been popular in Victorian times to believe, which doesn't make it ancient, but it isn't new. So if Easter isn't a pagan sex celebration somehow associated with the dawn, what is it? It's an invention of the Roman Christian Empire, and it has its roots in the Hebrew celebration of Passover. So why do we call it Easter then? It is possible that the modern English word Easter comes from a word like Eoster or another Anglo-Saxon word similar to it. Much of Germany was converted to Christianity by Anglo-Saxon clerics such as Saint Boniface, who lived from 673 to 754 CE, who might have introduced the Old English name Eostrun, which would even explain the appearance of the word Ostarun in the Abrogans, a late 8th century Old High German glossary. Another theory is that it comes from the Proto-Germanic Ostren, through Old English Easterdag, from Easter, meaning dawn, or the rising of the sun. In this theory, it would be related to the fact that the holiday is relatively soon after the spring equinox, and therefore relates to the visible lengthening of the days. And considering that eggs were a common symbol of the resurrection and rebirth in this time period, that would actually explain how the eggs came into it more than birds being turned into bunnies. I'm just saying. However, the fact of the matter is that the etymology behind the naming of the holiday as Easter is really murky, and it's definitely not proven one way or another. I also just want to say that the Grimms are never a good source. They altered mythology when they wrote it down significantly. They had a bias and they had intentions behind what they wrote down. So whenever they say, oh yes, of course, there was this totally ancient belief that I encountered evidence for, you can't see any of that evidence for reasons, but I saw it and I'm telling you that this is super ancient and that I've seen the proof of it. Come on. Anyway. That's all for today. If you like this kind of content, please be sure to like and subscribe and consider becoming a patron. Patrons gain access to all kinds of exclusive content, including some really in-depth write-ups of history and herbalism. You can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Sanctum of the Craft. Again, that's patreon.com/Sanctum of the Craft. And please be sure to send us your questions for our ongoing series, Ask a Witch. Have a wonderful whatever you celebrate at this time of year.